All right, all right. Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Psych and Theo podcast. You have been joining us for this political series that we've been discussing. And today we're going to be talking about the impact of politics on your mental health. I'm Sam, this is my buddy Tim, and we have been, we've been racking up some episodes here on this process. And it's a very difficult season for a lot of people. But hopefully, as we've talked about the biblical perspective on the role of government, how you should respond as a Christian, and then today we're talking about the impact on your mental health and how to take care of that. So, yeah, Tim, here we go. Another episode on this series.
All right, and just as we are recording this is scheduled to be released on Election Day. So those of you who are listening to this, people are going to be going to the ballot box. It's going to be wall-to-wall news coverage. Psych and Theo is going to get called up for interviews. No doubt. We're going to be in the war room with CNN. I'm sure Jake Tapper got him on speed dial. And yeah, so we intended this episode to be released on Election Day because there's a lot of consternation around Election Day. I remember the Election Day of 2020 and 2016 and all of the, let's say, the range of emotions that were felt on those 2 days.
Yeah, definitely a lot. Man, I'm sure we're going to see a lot afterwards. And today we're going to talk about what to do about all these different things. So I'll give a little bit of background and talk about how you can protect your mental health throughout this process, as well as your walk with the Lord as we think about this too. But let's start first of all, why was there such an increase in anxiety and depression and family breakdown and education? I mean, there were a lot of issues the last cycle, and it seems like every election cycle has its own thing. But the last one specifically, at least for me, firsthand experience, but also seeing with a lot of my clients, and then just seeing the news and seeing, what was happening to people. And a big factor to that was COVID. I'm not going to focus on that a lot today. I just want to talk a little bit about how you view your sense of control, your locus of control, and how that's going to be an important factor as we enter into this election cycle, election season. But just to give you just a little bit of numbers here on what happened the last election cycle. So not only did we have the election cycle, we're also dealing with the impact of COVID. And again, we had numerous students who came in reporting these symptoms of anxiety. So I wanted to share a couple of these with you. This is from the American Psychological Association, the APA. And here was the rate of anxiety, the people, US adults who are reporting symptoms of anxiety from January to December 2019. So reported anxiety symptoms was 7.4 to about 8.6, right? And then if we jump forward to April 20 through August 2021, that jumped up to 28 to 37.2. That is a significant leap in anxiety. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the factors surrounding that. But that's very significant there from April 20 through August 2021. Okay. Depression was 5.9 to 7.5%. That was from January to December 2019. Okay. So it's almost a little bit less than anxiety during the same time. But that jumped up to 20.2 to 31.1% from April 20 through August 2021. So there's a lot to unpack there. And I'm going to make the argument that the majority of this had to do with the fact that people did not have a sense of control. They couldn't control anything. I mean, we were not only were you not able to control or manage things that were before within your control, like going to work, taking your kids to school, going out, having fun with friends, having community, then you were told what not to do or what you could do. So it was two things, right? One, you didn't have the ability to do something, so you have a little lack of control there. But then you were being told what to do or what not to do by the government. So there was a lot of layers of you not having any agency over some of the decisions that you wanted to make for yourself and for your family or for people that you cared about. So that creates a sense of anxiety in and of itself. Not only that, Then you have the impact of families being together now. Tim, I don't know if you knew this or if we've talked about this before, but one of the things that started to happen, obviously, families typically throughout the day, they're not with each other, right? Kids are at school, the parents are at work, or you're at work, you're out with friends if you have that free time. And all of a sudden, depending on where you live in the country, right, there were different restrictions for different places. But then, you had to wear masks. So you lose that person to person connection, person just being able to read facial expressions. And we felt it in the office with, when we had a council for, I think it was like a couple of months, maybe 1 or 2 months, how to wear masks, how to counsel students. And it just took something away from those interactions. And, I'm just curious, for you or maybe from other people that you heard, I mean, what was that time like for you guys in interacting with your friends, with family? I mean, I had conversations with my mom who had a couple of health issues, and she was saying, you know what? Don't worry about any of this stuff. We're going to continue interacting the way that we do. And, obviously, if we're sick or something happens, then, we'll take care of each other. But we're not going to abide by this. And obviously, I stood kind of by the same stance. But what was that time like for you, just to get a kind of a feel for kind of our different spaces or what we were doing during that time?
You're talking about 2020?
Yeah.
Oh, well, 2020 was wild.
Yeah.
I mean,
and you were doing mission trips, right? So, I mean, I'm sure that.
well, no, because everything was getting canceled. All the flights were getting shut down.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So you weren't allowed to do that anymore, but that was part of what you would do.
Yeah. I mean, generally, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of loss control, frustration. I mean, I think personally, I was very frustrated.
Yeah.
Because I thought the whole thing was overblown. Not that I'm not saying COVID was fake or anything like that. I don't think that I had COVID. Okay.
Yeah.
But the responses to COVID were completely beyond the pale.
Yeah.
And unprecedented in world history. Okay. And so I and many others felt a great sense of frustration by what happened and the measures that were taken. I like what Tom Woods says. He's a political commentator. He said the public health sector took this monomaniacal approach during COVID, where the only thing of importance was, quote unquote, stop the spread.
Right.
And that took precedence. And everything else went by the wayside, including all other aspects of society that are important for us. So the whole world shut down. And a lot of people, lots of anxiety and stress. I mean, drug addiction, you mentioned suicide and depression and anxiety all skyrocketed. Yeah, lots of things. I mean, and I would just add to that government overreach.
Yeah.
We watched state and federal powers get expanded. I mean, just at such a rapid, unprecedented pace that anyone paying attention should have been alarmed by that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're seeing this happen on a large scale. And what was interesting to me was that there was a push in culture during that time, even from government or civil perspective, where mental health was starting to kind of be considered more like, hey, we need to focus on our mental health and you need to take care of yourself and all these different things. But the most important thing about mental health is the community or connection that you have with other people. And that was a primary thing that was being affected during COVID. So you have
it was a fundamentally anti-human response,
right? Yeah,
in COVID. I mean,
and it's not even a complicated answer. Like the answer was, you need to have human to human connection, and people were taking that, and it was being taken away.
Yeah, I mean, we witnessed quite bizarre Orwellian things going on. People hugging themselves, on like between plastic bag layers and all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, it was just insane. Insane time. So there were people who. There's some really good books on this that I could recommend if I could recall their titles. But some of the commentators I was following at the time did a really good job of kind of explaining why certain people fell under had different responses to this. Like you had people who were afraid to leave their homes. If they would leave their home, they were wearing a mask. They were driving alone with the windows up, wearing a mask. I mean, they're walking outside alone. No one's around. No one's like within 100 yards of them, and they're wearing a mask.
Right.
Why would people do that? Well, there's a sense of great anxiety. I mean, some people, they listen to authority. They're sort of more given to listening to authority than others, the authorities they perceive, and the media and government officials. So whatever those authorities say to them, they will conform and do, because they have this great anxiety of being pushed out of the crowd or the herd. Okay, so there's a big herd mentality that was going on at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people, the worst thing in the world for them is to be exiled from that crowd or community. So to conform is a way of preserving, self-preservation in a sense. But others had great anxiety over the liberties that were being lost and the government overreach and the really, really dark precedences that were being set. And they were being called crazy. You know, these people were being called crazy just for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Or you hate grandma because you bring these things up, you know. So there was a lot of anxiety and frustration there too. You could probably tell where I was.
Yeah. Right.
In that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward to 2024, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Real quick, so I mentioned the anxiety, mentioned the depression, and how that started to impact families. The reason why I wanted to bring that up also is because this person, I forget who it was, but I remember reading about it, and they made a really interesting point, because I was mentioning how, you didn't have families that were together throughout the day all the time, and now all of a sudden you have everyone at home and everyone isolated from everyone else, from their friends, family, extended family members, and so on. And the point that this man was making was, it seemed like people didn't really know how to even interact with their own family members, right? Their only outlet for conversation or relating was outside of their own home. So when they came back home and it's everyone together, they didn't know how to respond to that dynamic, which is an interesting point. I think that was that a lot of people experience, because you do see an uprise in more loneliness felt, right? The depression, the anxiety, and so on. And I just thought that was a very interesting point, as to, is it that people didn't really know how to create genuine human to human connection with people that they loved and cared about, because those were the people that were being hurt the most. We saw an uprising, an uptick in a lot of different other areas as well. But what does this all have to do, I guess, with leading into the 2024 election cycle? All of it had to do, from 2020 and even before that, had to do with this idea of, I don't have any control over the things that are going on in my life. I don't have control over my job. I don't have control over my finances. I don't have control over my family. I don't have control over anything else that's happening around me. So here's the state where people were in at that time. So the way that I want to kind of set this up for this upcoming election is that you still, at least outside of your own family, don't have a lot of control over the outcome of what this election is going to be. And hopefully you're not creating for yourselves this sense of fear. You mentioned fear earlier, that was a main tool that was used at that time. Like, if you go out, you're going to hurt someone, or you don't really care about your family members if you do this or that. And that's the same tactic that's used every election cycle. If you don't do X, that means this, right? And if so-and-so gets into power, we're doomed. That's it. Everything's over. So fear is a very common tactic and use, and fear causes anxiety. Fear can also cause depression. So, so as you look to this next election cycle, I think one of the primary things that I want to encourage you to do is, what's within your control, right? And how do you prepare for something, or prepare for things that are outside of your control? And a big part of that is this aspect of acceptance, right? Accepting what is within your control. So for example, if you fear a certain thing that can happen, the first thing to ask yourself is, how much control do I have over that outcome, right? No president is going to be able to fix all your problems, right? So you have to kind of start with yourself, with your family, with your close group of friends or close connections first. You got to start there. And I think I mentioned this in one that we did in an episode that we recorded, but we didn't get to air it. If you take this principle with you, I think this will be super helpful. The family can't survive without the nation, but the nation cannot survive without the family. And Tim, in one of the previous episodes, you mentioned kind of the established order. And because the established order kind of starts with the family, father, husband, be head of the household, wife, being supportive in that, and then having this family unit. It's kind of like its own little government there, no? Where you have someone kind of leading the family, and that is your locus of control, right? If you're a mom, again, that's your locus of control. If you're a dad, that's your locus of control. If you're single, that's your locus of control. Just think of everything that's within your realm to do. That is where you need to place the most focus on, right? You have skills, you have abilities, you have certain levels of resilience that are going to help you get through this next election cycle. So I would encourage you to just focus on and start thinking about right now what's within my control and not putting all of your eggs in this basket of if this election goes your way, things are going to go well because there's still a lot of other things that are not within your control. And again, just refocus everything that is within your locus of control. Felt like I said that so many times there, but but you get the point. Just things that are within your control. Any question that came up from that?
I have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily have a question from that.
Yeah.
Let me just read some things that I think are in the forefront of political discourse right now for people to kind of understand what you're talking about. These are big issues that people don't necessarily have control over in their personal life. Inflation, World War III, the housing market, LGBT, immigration, reproductive rights, guns, racial discrimination, religious persecution. All of those things are huge political conversations happening right now at the national level. But as an individual person, or maybe as an individual family, I don't really have a lot of control over that. Like I can vote, I can voice my opinion, but there's 330 million people in this country. You know? And so I'm sort of, in a proverbial sense, crossing my fingers and hoping that more of the country believes like I do, but they may not. Arthur Brooks has a really good advice on this. He's a behavioral economist, and he has a book called, he used to have a podcast called The Art of Happiness. And he makes this observation that when someone's focused on politics, the more focused someone is on big national politics, the more anxiety that they'll usually feel, because these are huge issues and with big movements behind them, and you have coordinated media efforts and hundreds of millions of dollars going into ground game activism to move the needle a little bit politically, and you're just one person observing this. I mean, it's like being in the middle of an ocean and watching like a hurricane come over the horizon. And it's like you're hoping the hurricane blows to the left or to the right. But you might get caught in it. And that's a little bit like what national politics is as an individual person. Is like you don't really have control over that storm. It's a big thing. And if you focus on that big thing, it's going to create a lot of anxiety in you.
Yeah. And as you were talking about that, those were a lot of great points, by the way, of things that are not within our control. And that thing becomes a lot bigger if all you expose yourself is to information that reminds you of all of those things that you're not in control of. For example, I think there was a study done where there was a strong correlation between how much news you watched and how anxious you were about those specific things. Because it's happening outside of you. It's so much focus and anxiety. Usually it's something about the future. It can be in the past, but usually it's focused on the future, things that are not within your control. So it doesn't allow you to focus on the present. So if that's always on your mind, things that are not within your control, it's going to continue to make you feel like you're not in control of anything in your life, which then leads to this aspect of depression. Again, those are often comorbid, right? They often are linked together. If you're anxiety, you can have some depression or vice versa, right? So it makes a lot of sense. If you're focusing on things that you're not in control of, you're going to feel depressed. You're going to feel defeated. You're going to feel like you don't bring any contribution to your work, to anything around you. And you're going to start feeling sad and worthless, right? Again, a lot of feelings of depression. So if you're exposing yourself to news consistently or social media and all you're seeing is negative, that's going to have an impact on your mood, right? And that's the other part of it too, is that give yourself moments, just little moments where you can check and just be informed to what's happening. But if you do that every single day, oh gosh, guys, you are going to be highly anxious, highly depressed really quickly. So, and I think, taking a fast from those things, from political updates and all that, I think will be good. You want to be informed. You want to know what's going on. But again, the things that are within your control. And the only thing within your control right now is everything that's within your household and who you're going to vote for on the day of election, which is today, the day of release of this episode. And then after that, again, all of those things that they've been promising, even depending on those things, hoping that they're going to happen, still not within your control.
Yeah.
But you're going to be hoping for those things to happen. And I wouldn't even focus on that. Just continue to do what you've been doing on a day to day, be consistent with it, and continue to focus on that, because that's going to empower you to feel like, okay, I have control over these things. How will I prepare for that? It'll help you to focus on the present, not on the future, not on the past. A good guideline.
All right. So I think we can get into some biblical theological advice if you want.
Absolutely.
You ready to go deep?
Let's go deep. Yeah.
Okay. We're going to go deep and we're going to go conspiratorial. Put on your tinfoil hat here. Okay. So I like what you said about things that you focus on. If you focus on the things that are outside of your control, it's going to cause more anxiety in your life. I think there's a direct inverse to that or converse to that in the scriptures, where the Bible continually tells us to fix our gaze or our mind's eye, fix our heart and our soul on the Lord. You see that in the Old and New Testament. David says, I fix my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Psalm 27:1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? All throughout the scriptures, we're told to fear, not don't be afraid. Isaiah 6. He says, in the year that King Uzziah died. So this is chaos, political chaos in Israel. Isaiah is really worried. And he has this vision of God in the temple. God's on his throne. And the angels are around him singing, holy, holy, holy. Ezekiel, on his way to Babylon, has a vision of, everyone reads about, oh, it's a UFO. The wheel within a wheel, it's a UFO. No, it's God is on his throne and he's in control. A lot of these visions that the prophets have are about God being in control. Daniel, all the visions about the latter times and the end of days. The Most High is on his throne. The Son of Man will bring all the nations to heel. You get all the way in the New Testament, go all the way to Revelation 1. The New Testament church, this is like 90 AD, 90s AD. They're being persecuted. All but one disciple of Jesus is dead, martyred. The only one that's left is John. And the Romans tried to kill him. They boiled him alive and he didn't die. He wasn't harmed. And so they said, well, we can't kill this guy, so let's get rid of him. So they put him on the island of Patmos. He's exiled. The churches are being persecuted under Domitian. Yes, Domitian. I always get Diocletian and Domitian mixed up in my head. Forgive me, church historians. I should know better. Pretty sure it's Domitian is the emperor. Severe persecution. And during this time, John has a vision on the island of Patmos, and he sees the resurrected, glorified Christ. He falls flat on his face, and Christ reaches out his hand and grabs him and picks him up. And the first thing he says to him is, fear not. He says, for I am the everlasting one. I am the eternal one. I was the one who was dead and then raised and alive forevermore. And I hold the keys of death and Hades. And all the imagery of this glorified Christ is imagery of lordship over all of creation and over his churches. So in the midst of all the persecution that was going on, Christ is still over his churches. And there's actually angels over the churches too. So God is ministering to his churches this whole time. But he tells them to fear not. I think that's the key principle we need to take from the scriptures. And I don't mean to sound cliche when I say that, but the first century Christians, I think, dealt with a little bit more, a little bit more than we were. Now, they weren't facing like global annihilation, with like nuclear war or anything like that. But I don't think that's possible in the biblical narrative anyways. So we shouldn't fear that. but they had reason to fear your persecution. But God tells them, fear not. Don't be afraid. Look to me and remember, hold fast, persevere. Mm-hmm. So I think that's first one is don't fear. Fix your eyes on the Lord. Second is notice that, like, understand that this is spiritual warfare. It's not like the spiritual warfare of like going around, like I always like to say, going around kicking demons in the face, that kind of spiritual warfare. This is high level geopolitical spiritual warfare. The scriptures talk about rulers and powers and principalities in heavenly places. They also talk about Satan himself being, he is the God of this world. He blinds the minds of people. He walks about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. That language actually is in the context of persecution. It's of the Christians. So Satan is kind of looking to see who he can actually kill and destroy. The evil powers of this world under Satan use political chaos to their advantage. They want to institute evil. So if you understand, like, if all this stuff is making you anxious, just understand it's warfare. The enemy is at work. And that actually may help you to understand, oh, okay, like, oh, I understand now. I'm in a war. Like, think of it this way, like, the more you know about something, the less anxious you are about it. The more you know about it. Okay, like when you were a kid, you were afraid of, like, oh, there's a monster in the closet, or there's something under my bed. Okay. And if you looked in the closet, you looked in the bed, you're like, oh, okay, there's nothing there. The more I know about it. Now, I'm not saying there's nothing there in the spiritual world, but the more you understand that what is affecting you is not just some happenstance. It's not just some random stuff happening. There's actually an enemy at work. It kind of wakes you up to, like, oh, okay. What can I do? I can pray. I actually have authority over the enemy in many respects through Christ. And God's in control anyways. So I don't need to, even though there's chaos in the world, and that might actually mean spell turmoil for me in my personal life, God's still in control. And as long as I understand this is spiritual warfare that's going on. And side note, that's also why Christians need to be engaged in politics, is because it's actually spiritual warfare that's happening. Just know, like, that's going on. So that's the second thing. So one, God is in control. Don't fear. Two, you're in a spiritual war. You got responsibilities as a Christian in a spiritual war. Things you could do is preach, evangelize, pray, try to influence the things that you can. But don't worry about the big things, because let God take care of that. And the third thing, I think, is getting to your point, and that's acceptance. Accepting what comes. Augustine, who's a really famous father of the church, he lived in the late 4th century, early 5th century. So this is like, if you're thinking like early 400s, he writes a book called The City of God. The City of God is all about helping Christians understand their role in the world, like how you reconcile the kind of the coexistence of good and evil in the world. Augustine is writing this book in the wake of the collapse of the Roman Empire. Rome has just been sacked and destroyed by the Goths and the Visigoths from the north and Germanic tribes. Rome, this eternal city, has just been wiped out. I mean, this is just chaos. I mean, as St. Jerome said, it shook the whole world when Rome fell. This eternal city, I like, when I teach Revelation 1, I like to bring this up, that Christ is the eternal one. And this is in contrast to Rome. The Romans would call Rome the eternal city. And the city of God in Christ still stands. That truly is eternal, not the city of Rome. The city of Rome is not eternal. Like, the Rome fell, and it was a Christian empire, and it fell. And so Christians were just reeling, like, what? I mean, the pagans were blaming the Christians, like, you guys are the reason why we fell, And so Augustine's City of God is sort of an apology against, not an I'm sorry apology, but an apology in the sense of a defense against those accusations. But he tells Christians, and this is one of the main points of the book, is that the city of God, that is, there's a line that runs through the heart of every person. And on one side of that line is the city of God, and the other is the city of man. And what your place in the city of God is depending on your faith in Christ. But the city of God isn't bound to some empire like the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire would fall, the city of God continues. And so Christians need to understand that their place in this world is that we're pilgrims. We're always going to be pilgrims in the city of God, dealing with the city of man and all of its vices and wickedness and wars and turmoil and all that stuff. The city of God endures amidst the cities of man. And I would say to American Christians that we might be looking at a situation where the American quote unquote empire, even though it's not quite the same kind of empire, America's dominance in the world is waning. And we might be looking at a situation where our country goes through a really, really hard time, something that it would just be unimaginable, you know, and the world might totally change within our generation. Can you accept that as a Christian? Or is your identity so bound up in being American and being that America is the great, it must be the greatest, must be number one? If that produces a lot of anxiety in you, that America might slide off the world stage, then I would say you probably need to do a little bit more meditation on Augustine and who's really in control of this world. No, that's not to say we can't fight for the good things in this world, and there's a lot of good things about our country that are worth preserving and worth fighting for. I'm not saying don't do those things, but the point that you made about acceptance, accepting what comes, because the city of God is eternal. America is not the eternal city. Constantinople is not the eternal city. It fell in the 1400s to the Muslims, and that was another earth-shattering event. The city of Rome is not the eternal city. The city of God is the eternal city, and that is His church.
Love that. It's good, Tim. It's good. You know, and close out with this as well, as you were talking about that. You know, one of the big words in the psychology or counseling world is this idea of resiliency. And one of the ways, this is one of the benefits to looking back, is that as you think about this next upcoming season with the election, is that whatever coping skills or things that you used the last time around, because that was a very difficult time for everyone, for a lot of people, whatever you used at that time to cope, or whatever you learned from that time to cope, you can always draw back on some of those things to use this time around. So what did you do last time that you weren't happy with, that didn't help? Avoiding doing that and seeking to do things that actually did help. And I made this point very early on about probably the most important need that was neglected during the last time around was seeking or not having the human to human connection, not being with other people face to face. So seek this time with other people, not to create divisive or being argumentative with people that you love and care about. Talk about issues, do so respectfully. I mean, you know, we do this all the time, where we can talk about issues. And if you disagree, then you disagree, and that's fine. But you shouldn't be losing so many people from this and from this topic, because it's just one part of all of your life, one part of everything else that's going on in your life right now. So focus on those things that helped you get through some things last time, and every difficult situation that you've had before. The Lord has carried you through some difficult moments. Use that, draw close to Him, and to your point, at the end of the day, God's in control of everything. Everything else that's not within your control, don't focus on that. Focus on what God has placed on your plate at this moment in time. God is in control of everything. I think it's a good place to close out this series. All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in. Sam and Tim here, saying we'll see you next time.